Hello everyone, and thank you for joining us today with the University of Essex Space to Grow webinar. As I mentioned at the start, this one is an exclusive one-off webinar with Dan Spicer from Ventura Digital, and we'll be looking at social media, and in particular social media for innovative businesses and how you can really get the most value out of using social media. Before we get into that, just a quick introduction to myself. So I'm Josh Clark, the Business Support Coordinator at the University of Essex's University Enterprise Zone team. I have my colleague Christian here as well, also on the call, and of course Dan, who will be taking the webinar. So just a little bit about the University of Essex's Enterprise Zone. So we run both the Angels at Essex platform and the Space to Grow programme. So Angels at Essex is an equity investment platform that connects businesses with connects investors with innovative businesses. And Space to Grow helps those businesses to prepare for investment through webinars and one-to-one sessions, and also helps investors to recognise good opportunities to invest. So this webinar today is part of our Space to Grow programme. And our Space to Grow Investment Readiness series starts next week on the 20th of October. So if you like what you see today, make sure you're signing up for the remainder of our webinars. You can find the information of those, if you haven't received already, on the Space to Grow webpage and also on our social media at UEZ Space to Grow. So as I said, today is a very special edition of Space to Grow, as we're all about social media. And as we were saying before, Dan has drawn in the big crowds today with big audience. So we know a lot of you had requested a session on social media, so we had to get the best of the best in to speak about it. So I'll introduce to you now Dan. And in fact, actually, just before we do that, we'll do a poll just to see how everyone's doing with their social media strategy. So if Christian could just, yeah, that's it. So do you currently have a social media strategy for your business?
Numbers are rolling in like crazy, so let's give it just a few seconds. I think we'll give it 30 seconds and then we'll close off the polling.
Excellent.
It's quite interesting seeing the numbers rolling. Okay, that's it. Should I display it?
Yes, yeah, if you could share the
okay.
responses there. So yeah, as we can see, 60% of you don't currently have a social media strategy. Hopefully by the end of today's webinar, you'll start thinking about some things that you can put into your social media strategy. But without further ado, what I'll do then is hand over to Dan from Ventura to take it away.
Thank you. Thanks, Josh. Thanks for that introduction. And thank you everyone for obviously your time today and taking an hour out of your day to obviously listen to the webinar and today's content. Just to give you a bit of background about myself, I'm Dan Spicer. I'm founder and strategy director at Ventura Digital, and we're a social first digital marketing agency based in Colchester. Actually, recently we were up until recently based at the Innovation Centre at the University of Essex, and kind of know the team well there and kind of utilize those resources to help us grow and scale, and actually only recently moved out due to us actually scaling and moving on to the next level. So kind of understand that journey through startup. We're 4 years old now, a team of 12 people based in-house who manage social media campaigns and digital marketing campaigns for a number of clients, both B2C and B2B. And today's session obviously is going to be focused around kind of getting value from social media and understanding kind of the key areas or key considerations to help drive your social media strategy. And obviously there's quite a lot to consider within social media, and we won't be able to cover everything in a short, sharp kind of, I'm hoping 45 minutes, which will leave some time for some questions towards the end. But we'll see how we get on. But effectively, I'm going to cover quite a lot today, so hopefully you get some value out of the session. So as I kind of mentioned to kick off, there's quite a few different areas to consider in social media, and often when brands and businesses are thinking about social, they think purely in the aspect of social media platforms. So Facebook, what am I doing on Facebook? What am I doing on Instagram? Am I using LinkedIn correctly? Am I using Twitter correctly? Which is very much a trap that marketers and businesses fall into, because ultimately you're starting from the end goal, which is the channel strategy, and you're not able to kind of look at it from a higher picture and try and understand the value that you actually want to deliver from those social channels, which will kind of help steer your thinking. So loosely, from a kind of social strategy perspective, this is a framework that we developed that looks to try and outline all of the different areas that you can get value from when using social media, depending on your business. Now, you won't use all of them. If you're B2B, you'll be using some of these. If you're B2C, you'll be using others. But effectively, there's 4 key pillars where you can generate value from social media. Number 1, social selling. So really understanding how you use platform to sell your products and your services, to build brand awareness around your business, your products and your services, and drive them into a place where they can buy your product and services. So often direct to consumer e-com platforms. So there's social selling. Then there's social governance. So often when you get to a certain size and scale, or if you have kind of customer service element to your business offering. So if you're a tech platform, as an example, you're a tech startup, ultimately as you drive in more consumers of your product, you are going to need an element of social customer service, where people might be tweeting you questions about your platform or your software, and you need to answer them in real time. So there's social governance. Social HR. So this is more around kind of employee, this is about recruitment and employee branding. So as you start to scale your business, you'll need to start recruiting, and often you can save a lot of cost by utilizing platforms such as LinkedIn's recruitment feature to drive awareness of your open roles, and actually save a lot of costs from using recruitment agencies. So there's value in social HR. And then social community. So that's really around organic social influencer programs and how you utilize organic social media to drive engagement with your potential customers or your actual customers, and kind of maintain and nurture that engagement. So obviously there's a lot you can focus on, and actually very mature businesses, large scale businesses, will have a strategy that encompasses each of these pillars and have teams and resources that will look to deliver value from each of these pillars. But from a startup perspective, there's some really key focus areas which I've highlighted in red, and that's what we're going to focus through today in this webinar. So if we just skip to the right hand side, organic social. So obviously as a starting point, in terms of free activity and inverted commas, you can ultimately use social networks to grow an organic audience and engage them. So we'll look at that. Then on the left-hand side, there's social advertising. So the platforms are especially platforms like Facebook and Instagram, are some of the cheapest advertising platforms on the market, significantly cheaper than above-the-line advertising, direct mail, TV, radio, etc. So it gives you a really good opportunity to drive kind of cheap visibility and drive kind of a targeted awareness of your business. So we're going to cover that. And then employee advocacy is an interesting one that I want to touch upon today, because that really does play into kind of how the platform algorithms work and how those share content within kind of various networks in each of those platforms. So there's a real good opportunity to capitalize on using your team or your network of partners, etc., depending on how your business is set up, to kind of generate more and more awareness, brand awareness through social media. So we're going to kind of focus on each of those. And then below the arrow are some of the kind of key metrics that you can kind of look to understand the value from social media. And often when I talk to businesses around their social media strategy, they have an idea of what to do. But actually, when I ask about metrics that they're tracking, very rarely do they have these kind of real value metrics in place, like referral traffic. How much traffic can I drive into my website from social media? Like conversion traffic, how many leads have I captured from social media? How many customers am I driving? And what's the cost per lead? All of those key metrics can fall out of that conversation. But as a starting point, you really need to be thinking about those metrics and where you think you can deliver value from social media, and then work backwards from there. But as I mentioned, the agenda today is going to focus on those kind of 3 buckets, red buckets that I've highlighted, and we'll kind of move through. Just to get a starting point, we're just going to run another quick poll just to get an indication of the audiences that are on the webinar. Just a quick one to really understand whether you're a B2B company or whether you're a B2C company. So whether you target, whether your products are targeted directly to the consumer or whether they're targeted to a business audience. And then depending on the outputs of this poll, I can kind of shift the conversation to make sure that we're obviously, and I'm giving you as much value as possible, depending on the nature of your business. So, poll should be up on the screen now.
Yeah, we'll give it about 30 seconds.
Votes will be flying in, and I'm gonna guess 60-40 B2B swing. I have absolutely no idea who's registered for do this. So this.
Okay, so we'll end it there, and I'll share the results.
Oh,
there you go.
Put my money on it. So 60-40 B2B swing, which I naturally assumed, given obviously a lot of stuff, given the topic of this webinar is social media for innovative businesses. A lot of innovation is happening in the B2B space right now, looking at kind of new platforms, new technology, or new business models that can support kind of B2B. So yeah, I'm not surprised that there's a swing there from that perspective. But obviously it's a quite actually loosely quite an even split. So I'll kind of steer the conversation towards both audiences, and we'll kind of move through and try and give you as much value as possible on that front. So to start off with, I wanted to kind of, the first kind of 20 minutes of this session is going to give an overview of social media, where we are today, how we've kind of the evolution of social media over the last few years, to kind of get some context in there around kind of how we got to where we are today. And then I'm going to talk I'm going to move into the very much the nitty gritty of the strategy and talk about organic and paid social. So there's a bit of context. We all know the power of social media and the power it has to effectively transform lives. This is the Egyptian uprising, the Arab Spring, many years ago. It was well documented that Facebook and Twitter were the driving force behind these protests during the Arab Spring. They were used to create community groups who could then go and formalize kind of various kind of protests in various locations, and Facebook was very much cited as the driving force to that. So much so that the Egyptian government actually shut down access to Facebook and Twitter during that period to stop people from organizing those protests. We also know the power of social media to elect governments. Obama campaign was one of the first campaigns to really use social media to communicate. He was all over YouTube, he was all over Facebook and Instagram, and very much utilized the social networks to drive awareness of his campaign message. And ultimately, in his actual autobiography, he cited social media as one of the main reasons why he was elected and was able to kind of accelerate the voice of his campaign. And a really powerful kind of platform for increasing that message. And then more recently, we know the power of social media to be a little bit more nefarious. So if anyone's watched The Great Hack on Netflix, if you haven't, I would implore you to watch that. It's a really interesting watch. It's all around Cambridge Analytica and how they use data and ultimately Facebook to extend messages and target people to a really kind of psychographic level and get messages that would really resonate with people. And ultimately that was used in certain ways that maybe we're not going to talk so positively around in terms of getting certain people kind of elected into government. But actually, if I skip over that, the nature of that targeting and the nature of what Cambridge Analytica did in terms of understanding how the algorithms work and targeting messages aligned to your very specific needs is exactly what social media can deliver for your business. And actually the advertising platform within Facebook and Instagram is well set up to do something very similar that Cambridge Analytica did. So we'll talk about that algorithm, but actually that Great Hack is a really interesting watch. And then finally, actually, we know the power of social media to save lives. So this is an example of the Japanese tsunami that happened many years ago. Red Cross was one of the first charities to utilize Facebook to understand, to spread messages and monitor where people were asking for help. And actually the Red Cross set up a system where they could pull in Facebook messages from Facebook and worked with Facebook to pull in messages where people were requesting help. And then they would drop packages, care packages into those locations based on where people were asking for help on the Facebook platform. So we know the power that social media has to change lives, to transform lives, and to really get the message there out to people. And then finally, actually, we know the power of social media when messages maybe aren't such important, but can really generate visibility. I don't know if anyone saw this tweet. I think this was quite a while ago now. This was the 2014 Super Bowl. There was a power cut at halftime. I don't know if you remember it, but during the halftime show, everything just cut out, went completely pitch black. All you could see was people's kind of phone lights as they were trying to take photos and selfies themselves in the dark. And then Oreo Cookie tweeted, "Don't worry, you can still dunk in the dark." On Twitter. Within 24 hours, that tweet was seen by 82 million people. 3 times as many people saw that tweet than saw their halftime Super Bowl ad, which cost them $8 million to produce and distribute. So they got $8 million worth of value by one very timely tweet that was posted out effectively for free, minus the team and the resource that I put behind that. So social media gives you an ability to accelerate a message when you think about it in a timely and relevant way. And we do know the power that social media can have to distribute your message. But more importantly, as we move to the current times, we're obviously in a very interesting period right now. We're in a kind of post-COVID, I say post-COVID, right banging smack in the middle of COVID, but post-COVID kind of period where we're starting to understand what the new normal looks like and how people are now communicating, how people are using technology to communicate in a different way. All of the technology that's in place to allow us to work from home and work in slightly different ways. And what that has ultimately led to is this explosion in social media engagement and activity. From March to April, we've been looking at all of our data for all of our client data. We run some analysis across over 20 of our client accounts, which spend over nearly £400,000 in media spends. And effectively, when we look at the data, there's been a 230% increase in engagement and interactions and monthly active usage across social media during this period. So now more than ever is the time to be engaging and communicating with people using social media, because there's been an explosion in active engagement and activity within the platform. So if you start thinking about how you can communicate, you can really use this as an opportunity to engage and grow and build relationships with your potential customers, future customers. And mobile really has been the catalyst for that. And if you're thinking about social media, often brands and businesses fall into the trap of thinking about it on a desktop device. So I'm looking at a computer screen right now. If I'm looking at my content, I'm looking at designing a nice image or creating copy, I'm more than likely going to preview it on a desktop device. But through our social media activity, 91% of all of the clicks that we've had on all of our social media campaigns come from a mobile device. That's up from 68% just last year. So actually 91% of people that see all your content is going to see it on a tiny little screen, and is going to see it doing this. And more often than not, social media content and the way you think about images and text is often through the mindset of a laptop screen or a desktop screen where you're seeing it blown up. But first and foremost, we need to be thinking about the mobile device and how that content shows up on mobile. And ultimately, it's not just for kids. So across, you can see the age ranges here on the slide. 45 and 55 upwards is the fastest growing segment since 2018. Some would argue, especially on Facebook, that that's all that's left. Everyone else is actually on Facebook. But actually, more importantly, when we look at platforms like Instagram, for instance, which is often skews quite younger, older demographics are the fastest growing segments on those platforms. So actually, if you are a B2B business, you're maybe targeting a slightly, maybe depending on your offering, a slightly older demographic. You might immediately think LinkedIn is the place to be because of the nature of that B2B platform. But actually, there are opportunities across all the other platforms that certainly warranting a test. And then finally, kind of just to kind of cap off the kind of context setting, it's clear that social media is now more and more of an important skill within companies. Actually, if you are of a stage of business where you're recruiting, if you're recruiting any form of marketing role, any form of customer service role, and sometimes broader roles, you are likely to have thought about finding someone with some kind of social media experience. And actually, if you look at LinkedIn and all the advertised job roles, job roles for social media manager have actually declined by 43% in the last 2 years. So there's less companies looking for social media managers. However, job roles with social media in the description have increased by 19 times, by 190%. So there are 19 times more roles that have social media as an experience element of that role, or as a qualification element of that role. So more and more businesses are understanding the need to have social media within their business and understand how you capitalize on it, which hopefully I'm going to give you some feedback on through this session. So that was a bit of context to the background of social media. And ultimately, I think most of everyone on this, most of you on this call today and on this webinar are going to be on the left-hand side of this social media maturity curve. And loosely, this is how we look at how mature an organization is with regards to their social media strategy. Most organizations start on the left-hand side. It's normally an individual within a company that says, yes, I'll take responsibility. If it's just you as a startup, it'll be you as the founder, the CEO, the ops director, and the marketing manager, all in one go, thinking about how you utilize social media. Then as you grow through through maturity, you might then have a social media team, or you might have a dedicated person managing all of your social activity in the middle here. And then a lot of mature organizations will then, on the right-hand side, have social media responsibility disseminated through the teams. So you might have a customer service team with a role for social. You might have a HR team with a role for using LinkedIn advertising to recruit roles, and so on and so forth. So you'll be able to place yourself on this social maturity scale, and probably closer towards the left-hand side within those. And importantly, it is a key consideration. Hopefully, because you're on the call, you know it's a key consideration. For anyone that might be watching it at a later date, it is important that you do pay attention to social media. And the reason being this stat on the slide, Gartner released a report a couple of years ago to say that by 2020, which we're kind of in the middle of now, 1 in 4 businesses who don't use social media will lose their market position against their competitors. So 1 in 4 businesses who don't understand how to generate value from social media will lose to a competitor. And actually that same report showed that 1 in 5 of those businesses that lose will actually cede their dominance to a company founded after 2010. And basically what this is telling me is that newer companies, ultimately like yours as startups that are on the call today, understand social media better than a lot of older companies. So actually those older companies are at risk to being overtaken by newer companies who understand how to generate value from social. Whereas actually for many of you on the call today, this is the biggest opportunity. Really using social media and generating value to help accelerate the growth of your business, to start being one of these statistics where you overtake one of the older companies that are playing in a similar space. And finally, just to round this off, all of this is part of the kind of digital experience. So there was a Forrester report released that showed 92% of companies view their digital experience as one of their top priorities. So if you're a B2B tech platform, obviously that's the technology, the experience they use with your software. If you're an e-commerce business selling direct to consumer, that's your Shopify website or your e-commerce website, making sure that the payment system is seamless and that overall experience is frictionless. And digital is obviously core to that, and social media is core to that. But something to pay attention to is the results of the survey they ran, which showed that the majority of businesses fail to deliver good experience online. So ultimately what this is saying to me, especially from a social media perspective, is if you're using social media, you should be doing it to the best of your ability. And there's much more risk by just starting up a social media profile, starting up a Facebook profile, posting and leaving it sitting there. There's nothing worse than me, and I've done it before, researching a business, a product that I want to buy, going to their Facebook profile or their Instagram feed or their Twitter feed and seeing the last post from 2016. It clearly shows that they effectively don't have anything to say. There's nothing new, and it doesn't really give me much trust or put much credibility in a brand where they're not actively present and at least kind of posting some form of content. So ultimately, the outcome of this is if you're thinking about it, really put the time in to think about the strategy, to think about what you want to get from it. And actually, there's no more better advice I can give than actually to take the time to research a lot of the elements that I'm going to talk about today, especially around algorithms, and really understand how the social media platforms work before you just go ahead and start posting on the platforms without really knowing kind of that element. And hopefully I'm going to give you an indication of that. And then luckily I've got this slide. I skipped over a couple of slides, but I've got this slide around B2B. If you're in a B2B organization, 62% of you, I think it was, within those, fundamentally social media will play and does play an important role in your go-to-market strategy. The B2B buying process has changed just as much as the B2B buying, B2C buying process. And the main stat I want to kind of pull out here is the stat in the middle. So 70% of the buyer's journey is complete before even engaging with that seller or engaging with that buyer. So by the time they actually come to talk to you, they've already done their research, they've already looked at your website, they've already crawled through your LinkedIn profile, they've already looked at all of your social networks, and they've made a decision up front before they reach out to you, which obviously validates the importance of having an active social media presence, because if your B2B consumers are researching for information, they're making a decision without even talking to you yet. So you don't even have the opportunity to sell them something. So your online presence, your social media presence does the selling for you. And that's why it is vitally important that you have an active and valuable social media presence. So to kick off with, a lot of times I get questions around kind of what social media platform should I be using, what one is right, which one is correct for me. So I'm hopefully going to give you a bit of context for that. Just before that, we're going to run another poll quickly, which just asks you around kind of what social media platforms you are currently on and which ones you're using, just to get an indication of where people are currently spending their time. For the, was it 40% of you that do have a social media strategy in place? So I'm assuming there's going to be quite a few of none of the aboves if from the 60% of people that said they don't have a social media.
This one is multiple choice, so you can select all of the ones that you do use on there.
We'll let it run for a couple of seconds. Yeah. They come flying in.
Yeah, still coming in.
All 36. Minus my team.
Okay. Yeah, I think that's most people on there. So I'll end it now and I'll share that. There you go.
Okay, interesting. Yes, so obviously a skew towards LinkedIn, given the fact that 60% of you are B2B, but interestingly, still quite a heavy swing towards Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram, which actually is really positive from my perspective. Often for B2B strategies, you might find that you focused on LinkedIn. No right or wrong answer, but LinkedIn is obviously the starting point for that, and Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and other platforms are normally, from a B2B perspective, pushed aside. No surprises on the LinkedIn over index. Really positive to see quite a few of you are using kind of multi-channel strategies, of course, being visible on some, and then just the 3 that aren't using any until this afternoon when you finish the webinar and you jump on and think about your social strategies. So that's interesting. So I'll close that. Super. So in terms of obviously what social media platforms you should be on, I think as granddads say everywhere, fish where the fish are biting. I can't I can give you an indication of, especially on a webinar where I'm talking to multiple people, I can give you an indication of the different platforms that might provide value. But ultimately, the best advice I can give you is to talk to your customers and talk to your potential customers and ask them which social media platforms they're active on. If you have a direct relationship, if you're direct to consumer and you're having retail conversations, if they're emailing you, for instance, or they're putting information anywhere, then you can ask them what social media platforms. If you've got an email database, you can run a survey. SurveyMonkey is a free tool where you can put a quick polling survey and send emails out to your customer database to understand what social networks they're using. Or if you're B2B and you're having early conversation with potential customers, I'd always try and actually ask them a quick question around what social media platforms they're active on. And that's really going to give you the best kind of insight into what social networks you should be using aligned to your customers' behavior. But ultimately, there's obviously key platforms that you can be on. And these are the 4 major social networks that are on that survey in order of monthly active users in the UK. So Facebook and Instagram obviously being the largest social networks, 32 million monthly active users. So monthly active means logged on to the platform once in the last 30 days. Facebook and obviously Instagram having the kind of largest proportion of users. So therefore, by proxy, you would assume that your customer is likely to be active on those platforms. Whether they're using it to buy products or not, they're still active on there, and there's an opportunity to target them. Then LinkedIn from a B2B perspective, so 16 million monthly active users on the platform. Within that, LinkedIn actually reports it as 22 million total registrations, but it's 16 million active users who are actively using the platform. And then Twitter down there at 13 million, but still a significant presence within those. Each of those having a kind of slightly different kind of skew, which I'll talk to. But some other considerations as well. So newcomer to the market, TikTok, you previously Musical.ly, less B2B opportunities, if I'll be honest. They haven't quite launched the advertising platform just yet for everyone to use. But they've just hit, or they've reported they just hit 8 million monthly active users, so a significant volume of people within those. Snapchat still within the kind of conversation. They've reported that they've got just shy of 15 million monthly active users on the platform, so a significant volume of people. And these two more or less aim towards the B2C market within those. And if you are B2C and you're targeting a younger demographic, say sub 25-year-olds, then these platforms are actually really important. And both of them, Snapchat more particularly, have pretty cost-effective advertising platforms where you can run ads targeted to your consumers. So if you are D2C skewing towards a younger demographic, I would advise you do the research into how those advertising platforms work. Lots of helpful how-to guides online around how to use those. And then chat platforms, so Facebook Messenger with 22 million monthly active users, and then WhatsApp right up the top with a reported 40 million active users on the platform. However, I take that with a pinch of salt. That's Facebook's data, but still a significant large platform. And actually, you can still utilize WhatsApp. You can still actually target people in WhatsApp and Facebook, and you can run WhatsApp and Facebook Messenger ads through the Facebook advertising platform. So you can actually run ads in Facebook and Instagram, which starts a WhatsApp conversation with your business. So potentially there's some opportunities there, and that's probably another conversation, but certainly worth the research around that. But more importantly, what I'm going to say, and a key kind of takeaway from all of this and from all the social networks, is all of them have individual algorithms. So they have organic algorithms that share your content to your prospective audiences, and they all work slightly differently. So it's very challenging for me to say to you there's a very particular strategy that you should be using for all of the social network algorithms. What I will, as one key takeaway, what I would say is the most important, I think the most valuable investment in terms of investment in yourself from a research perspective is understanding the algorithms that work for each of the platforms, both organically and paid. So every platform has an organic algorithm which shares content to your audiences, depending on how many followers you have. And they have an advertising algorithm, which works to share content depending on how you set up the advertising platform. If you Google it, there's lots and lots and lots of information around how they work. But more importantly, what's important to know is actually the way they work can be gamed in such a way to deliver you value. So in numbers, what that means is in Facebook, as an example, which I believe 50%, 55% of you said you use, if you get 135 people interacting with your content, liking, commenting, or sharing with their content, the way the organic algorithm distributes those interactions means you actually reach more people than having 1 million Facebook fans on your Facebook page. So actually, if you spend all the time and money in the world to get 1 million Facebook fans on your Facebook page, every time you post, it will reach just 15,000 of them because of the way the algorithm works. So actually, from a fan base perspective, the algorithm only lets 1.5% of your Facebook followers see your content when you post in their feed. So if you've got 1 million Facebook fans, 15,000 of them will see it in the feed. However, organically, if someone likes or comments on your post, Facebook actually takes that post and shares it with that person's network. So you might have seen it when you've logged into Facebook. It says Joe Smith likes this post, or one of your friends, Susan, commented on this post. You don't actually follow that page, but Facebook says, because you're friends with Susan or Joe, I'll show you that content because I think you might be interested in it, effectively. So if people like or comment on your post, up to 30% of that person's friends, peers, their own network will also see your branded post. So actually, if you run the numbers up, 135 people liking, commenting, or sharing down the bottom here actually reaches 15,000 people, over 15,000 people. So because of the way the organic algorithm works, if you can generate 135 likes or comments in any way, so you run a competition, you can incentivize it, you can ask lots of open-ended questions to your audience to try and get them to like or comment. When you get to 135, you'll reach more people than have 1 million Facebook fans. So that's where you can start to think about your strategy. And your strategy is not how many fans I can get, because that is a useless metric, if I'm going to put it bluntly. It's how many people can I get to interact with my post. It doesn't matter if you've got 1,000 fans, 15,000 people will still see the post if you can get 135 people to like it. I've just used 135 because of the percentages, but you can get more people to kind of interact with the post. And then for the 60% of you that are B2B, works very similarly in LinkedIn. LinkedIn has a different algorithm, so the percentages are different. Instead of 1.5% of your follower base, you can reach up to 10%. And instead of 30% of your personal network, you can reach up to 40%. But 28 interactions on a LinkedIn post reaches more people than having 100,000 LinkedIn followers on your page. So again, the strategy becomes, how do I drive interactions and rather than followers? And those interactions don't have to come from your followers. So you can share your post in other areas, you can share it on other platforms, you can use advertising to drive visibility of your post, to drive interactions and engagement. But that's where you'll kind of get the reach and engagement. So that's a really high level overview of just 2 platforms. TikTok's algorithm works very differently. Snapchat's algorithm works differently. Twitter doesn't have an algorithm, but it does do a chronological thing. So I could spend 2 hours talking about it, but effectively, if there's going to be one takeaway, it's depending on your selected social network, research how the algorithm works, and then start to understand how you might be able to kind of game that system to generate more visibility. And ultimately, what you're looking to do is try and find people that will be the 135 interactors. So this is Pareto's law. I don't know if anyone's heard of it. It's a 90%, 9%, 1% rule. What it says is, of all of your customers, 90% of them will be passive consumers. They won't interact with you, they'll just consume content. 9% will be curators. So they might interact with you, they might like a post here, like a post there. And then 1% will be your active creators. So they're the ones that are continually engaging with you, liking every post, love your brand, and engage with you. And it's your responsibility as a startup founder, it's your responsibility as a marketing manager of a startup, whatever your role is, to understand who that 1% is and how you can utilize that 1% to extend your messaging. And at a really high level, the 1% could be any of these. So it could be your customers. It could be customers who have already said that they're really happy with your product and happy to engage with you, and you might want to engage with them directly and just ask them to share your social media content. Might be influencers that you work with in the industry that you partner with. It could be people at the university enterprise zone. It could be the Space to Grow team that you might ask to share content, or it could be employees. And employees is an interesting one around advocacy to think about, because actually, if you do have a team, if you do have you have people within your team, or you have partners or contractors or freelancers who you work with, that's an immediate starting point for that 1% that can go and share your content and generate that initial boost. If I just flick back up, generate that initial boost, if you're a B2B company, to get you the first 10 of the 28 posts, 28 interactions you need, or the first 10 of the 135 posts that you need on Facebook. So employees or partners, team members, contractors, freelancers, agencies that you work with, that network of people that might go and share your content is your initial boost for organic, and then you just repeat that cycle to try and grow. And just to give you an indication, this is kind of what the average reach would look like. So on the top hand side, if you don't use employee advocacy, and you've got a Facebook post on the left hand side with 1,500 fans, and then you've got a LinkedIn profile with 200 connections. Every time you post, you can potentially reach 1,700 on the top row here. So that's the two added together. But actually, because of the algorithms, you will only reach on average 81 people every time you post. However, if you've got 5 employees, 5 team members, 5 partners, who through their personal network share the content, the potential reach is 6,200 of the combined fans on average. So the average Facebook person has 333 Facebook friends, a lot more than I have. And the average person on LinkedIn has 920 LinkedIn connections. So if they were sharing the content, algorithmically, you'll reach 3,700 people. So you can immediately see the differential by just asking or tapping someone on the shoulder and saying, can you share that post? Can you talk, can you like, or can you comment on that post? Or sharing it with a partner and saying, can you quickly like or comment if you don't mind? And actually having that startup mindset of who can we get to kind of support that? Because yes, it might seem like a bit of effort, but you can really see the difference in reach. And as you kind of build that momentum and you get people regularly engaging with you, you'll find that they'll see more of your content, they'll engage with it more, and you'll get that kind of momentum that you need as a startup to kind of start generating more and more brand awareness for your brand. Hopefully that makes sense. And obviously a whistle-stop tour, but if I'm going to round that section off with anything, it's really take the time to understand those individual algorithms, and because they do make a difference. Less time should be spent about worrying about the type of content that you're producing, the images, the ad copy. Is this bit of text right versus that bit of text right? Yes, that is a consideration, and you should spend time thinking about that. But the majority of your time should be spent actually thinking about how do we distribute that message? Like, who are the 5 people, who are the 10 people, who are the 28 people that can really help us accelerate the reach? And actually what you'll find is of these 3,700 people, there'll be some people who then go and engage with you. So they might like and comment on the post, which gives you even more reach. And then of their followers, you might get some more like and engagements from them, which gives you even more reach. And that's where you can get that virtuous kind of virality effect, which used to be a buzzword, but that's kind of where it comes from, is that kind of algorithmic distribution to do that. So that's an important consideration. Take the time to learn the algorithms. But what we can't ignore is the elephant in the room, which is social advertising. Social networks have declined and introduced that algorithm to 1.5% because some cynics would say they want you to pay for visibility. So you can only reach 1.5% of your organic audience, but actually you can pay to reach the other 95%. Cynically, you can look at it that way. It's the world we live in, unfortunately. But on the flip side, social advertising is the most cheapest, most cost-effective, and most highly targeted advertising platform you can use. You can target people by their interests. If they're interested in a particular product, in a particular service, you can target people by demographics, by location, by postcode. You can drop a pin on a map in Facebook and say, target anyone that lives in this radius with my message. So you can get really, really granular, and it's very, very cheap. So in Facebook and Instagram, the average cost per 1,000 views is £3.50. So it's going to cost you £3.50 to reach 1,000 people within those. That's 1,000 potential customers if you get your targeting right, for very, very cost-effective prices within those. So ultimately, the only main real cost is your time in understanding how it works and how you can utilize it within those. We'll skip over. We don't need a poll on this section. I think we'll kind of whiz through here, because conscious of time, and I've seen actually Q&A thing popping up on my screen, so there might be some few questions coming through towards the end, which we'll look at. So obviously, organic, social, and algorithms is one thing to understand, but ultimately we can't forget about social advertising. And social advertising is the quickest route to market for any business. It gives you the ability to target by any number of demographic and psychographic attributes, both from a B2C perspective here, and I'll go on to B2B in a second. This isn't all the targeting. So this is Facebook and Instagram, if I start on that, because it is the most popular advertising platform. However, this is very similar for Twitter. You can also advertise on Snapchat by a number of these factors and attributes. So it's very similar for all of them. But if we just concentrate on Facebook and Instagram, here's just some of the high level targeting elements that you can target against. You can upload your customer email addresses into the platform. Facebook and Instagram will match their email address with their active Facebook profile, and then you can show them content. You can upload mobile numbers. Website behavior, you can target people who have landed on your website and looked at a particular piece of content. So if they've landed on your website, say you're a B2B manufacturing company, as an example, if they've landed on your website and looked at a blog post that you created around sustainable manufacturing, you can then say to Facebook, show that individual this piece of content around our sustainable manufacturing product, as an example, because I know that they're interested in sustainable manufacturing. So you can retarget people based on their website behavior. And then down the bottom here, you can target by a number of things, but most importantly, interests. So if you sell a particular product or service, you can just type into the system, I want to target people who are interested in this product or service. We're working with a client who sells running apparel, and we target, unsurprisingly, people who are interested in marathons, as an example. And we target people who are interested in triathlons, etc. So you can target people by their interests, again for £3.50 for every 1,000 views, and look to see how many kind of sales you can generate from that. And then again, on the B2B side, LinkedIn also offers a highly targeted, really advanced advertising platform. Again, here's some high level things you can target, but you can target by industry, by employee size, you can target people by job title. So if you are creating a tech platform, for instance, that's sells, so say you're creating a HR tech platform that helps companies manage their employee documents, as an example, you can then use LinkedIn to target every HR manager that is based in Essex, as an example, and ensure that your messaging goes directly in front of HR managers who are looking for your software. So again, highly targeted within that. From a cost per view perspective, LinkedIn is much more expensive. So from a B2B perspective, the costs do increase, and the current average cost per 1,000 views in LinkedIn is £55. So you're going to pay around the £50 to £60 mark to reach 1,000 people. So it is very different to Facebook. However, my assumption is that your B2B offering is much more valuable than a direct-to-consumer offering. So if you're direct-to-consumer and selling hair products, your average order value is going to be a lot less than a B2B software company that's selling thousands and thousands of pounds. So obviously the economics of that kind of scale up But again, the opportunity is there. There's a whole, I could kind of spend a whole session talking about the how-tos of that, and actually LinkedIn and Facebook training in itself is probably another session, and hit me up afterwards if you're looking to explore some of that. We do offer kind of training sessions to get to the nitty-gritty. But again, from an advertising perspective, it's all around the algorithms and the pixel. Basically the Facebook pixel is what controls the advertising. And again, if you're researching, I would advise you to research the Facebook pixel and how it works. But at a high level, what it does is up front, this is a screenshot of the Facebook advertising platform. What you can do is tell Facebook what you want to do, what you want to achieve: traffic, sales on the right-hand side, conversions, lead generation if you're a B2B company. And then what it will do is it will look at that objective, and then as people click and engage with your ads, it will profile what people look like. It will profile the persona of someone who is higher value to you, so who is more likely to click and who is more likely to convert, and it will automatically redistribute your budget based on people that are more likely to convert. So a super powerful platform, and it does all of that automatically. All you have to do is know which button to click on the platform to set the advertising up. So again, social advertising, super powerful, and something that you should definitely be exploring if you're not already using it. And then finally, dynamic creative. So this is the most underused feature in all of the social networks, but mainly Facebook and Instagram. There's an option called dynamic creative, which lets you cycle through 10 different image variations, 5 different ad copy variations, 10 different headline variations, and then it will automatically use different combinations to find the best messaging that drives the best clicks. If you're a startup business and you're trying to understand what message you should be using, ultimately you will know your USPs, but you might have 3, 4, 5 different USPs that you think will work for your audiences. What Facebook allows you to do, and Facebook advertising allows you to do very cheaply, is put all of them in at once, and it will automatically cycle through all of your messages, all of your USPs, all of your images, and tell you which the best combination is. And it will tell you the best message, the best image, and the best headline, which is driving clicks and ultimately conversions. You can then take that insight and use it for your broader marketing. Put it in your email campaigns, put it in flyers, put it in your website, and put it in all of your comms, because you know and you've tested that that is the best combination, message combination that resonates with your audience. And as a feature, that feature is completely free. You just have to set up your advertising and obviously pay for the advertising, which obviously in a Facebook and Instagram environment is again, significantly cheaper. So dynamic creative optimization is a button that you switch on. If you're used to advertising and you can run before, that's in there. And that's something you should definitely switch on for everything. And you should invest the time creating all of those variations. And then finally, from a video content perspective, in an advertising world, video content is actually prioritized by the platforms. So it's actually slightly cheaper to use a video as an asset than an image, because videos keep you in the platform for longer. They keep you in the network watching the video. So actually Facebook and Instagram make it cheaper for you to advertise. So as a final consideration, video should be prioritized wherever possible within those. So just on the final point of that, if I just skip back to actually the slide, I was just skipping back through to the headline slide. If I'm going to leave you something, obviously from a social advertising perspective, I think hopefully, as I alluded to, there's some really, really advanced functionality within that anyone can set up and use to target your direct consumers and really get some insight around what is driving engagement by using that A/B testing function that I mentioned. So all I can do is implore you to take the time to kind of research 2 elements from a social media perspective. Number one is those organic algorithms. Understand how Facebook and Instagram differ because they're very different platforms. Instagram is very different to Facebook in terms of the algorithm. Lots of information online around how they work, which will give you a leg up against competitors who who don't know about that and don't know about how they're using it. Point 2 here, you think about your network and who you can use to accelerate: employees, customers, advocates. Hit me up on Twitter at Ventura Agency. I'll retweet your post. There's one of the 135 that you need to accelerate the reach, but really think about your network that can help you accelerate the reach of your organic. And then take the time to learn about the social advertising platforms, and Facebook and Instagram advertising platform, and LinkedIn advertising platform if you're B2B. Within those, you can set up a profile for free. You don't need to spend anything, just to poke around. I've just Googled, if I just Google social advertising guide, and the first 4 are free guides I've just Googled around how to use Facebook and LinkedIn. So ultimately, take the time to learn how those platforms work and test. Small scale, minimum spend. There is no minimum spend on Facebook, but £3.50 will get you 1,000 people. Start spending, start testing, start learning kind of how that works, and do more of what works and less of what doesn't, effectively. I've whizzed through that last section because I'm conscious of time, and we've got to 2 minutes prior to the end time for maybe a quick question within there. But hopefully that was helpful. I'll hand over to Josh to see if we're sharing any of the content and the slides. And then happy to answer a couple of questions if anyone wants to stay on for longer.
Thanks a lot, Dan. I think that was very informative. And I know from the chat, and we've got a couple of questions in the Q&A, a lot of people also found the same. And just a quick one to end on. We asked you a question at the start about whether you have a social media strategy. So now what we want to do is just ask you whether, if you had a strategy, has that changed as a result of this webinar? Or if you didn't have one, are you now going to put one together as a result of this webinar? Wow, some very positive results coming in here, Dan. I'll give you a couple more seconds just to answer that.
That's good.
Okay, we'll end that there, and I'll share the results with everyone.
Unanimous is what that is.
Oh, there we go.
There you go, 100% of people, Dan said that as a result of this webinar, they would change or create a social media strategy. So thank you. That was extremely useful. We will just ask a few questions if everyone has the time to stay in for a couple more minutes. So Christian, I know that you had one from before the webinar.
So as I have a habit of doing, I'll now abuse my power as a co-panelist to quickly slot a question in before I pass on to our audience. I have to run off myself, but I wanted to get this moment. So it's saying that you now pretty much have to pay to reach your audience online. You can't reach them organically anymore. Would you say that now the only way to run your business online is to pay for the ads then, do you think? Or do you still, or can you still go the organic route? Because for example, for my graphic design business, well, it would be good to know whether I should start investing a bit more.
Yeah, so ultimately, you don't have to pay. You can use organic, and if you don't have any budget, I kind of revert back to the element of kind of finding that 1%. So who is that network, previous customers, like if for your graphic design business, previous customers that you've worked with, partners. So if you use a videographer or you use kind of other partners in your network to help you deliver your services, can they help you accelerate the visibility of your content within there? And kind of utilizing organic more broadly, thinking about that engagement. So think about that algorithm. So if you don't have it, I was just looking at the Q&A where someone said, what can I do if I have no budget? Ultimately, that is it, is thinking about how you can accelerate organic. What I will say is that it's obviously harder work because you can't just pay Facebook and Instagram to say, go and reach 10,000 people as an example, or LinkedIn, which is much more expensive. But what I would say is, to give you something to aim for, you should definitely set some goals. So even if it's just as the basis of this presentation, I said 28 interactions gets you more reach than 100,000 followers. I would then set that as a goal, start up a quick spreadsheet and say, for every post, I need to get, my target is 28. So I will be then trying to find 28 people, just to give you something to aim for, to speak to make that to kind of like or comment on that post and interact with you. And then monitor your organic reach. So there's nothing better than kind of social proof and kind of self-fulfilling aspect of it. So monitor your reach and see your reach kind of grow as you grow up. What I will say is there's another question in the Q&A around kind of LinkedIn pods and the value of kind of the LinkedIn pods, which is again part of the same conversation around if you don't use paid, then you've got to do it organically, and LinkedIn pods is sometimes a method to do that. If people don't know what LinkedIn pods are, yeah, Christian, they are kind of pods around particular interests, which effectively look to game the algorithm. So you can join a pod and then you'll share each other's content, which kind of gains you kind of additional reach because you're all interacting with each other's content. There are obviously certain pros and cons to that. There's and inevitably that does kind of go along the lines of me saying you need to find kind of people to interact with you to extend reach, and that will extend your reach. The only downside to that, and the main downside, and the reason why I don't use LinkedIn pods, is because ultimately a pod of people is normally people that kind of are kind of settle around the same topic. So they've got the same audiences and very similar kind of interests. And actually the value in getting interaction is when someone interacts with you, that content is disseminated to that person's network. So you need that person's network to be a valuable audience for you to be able to sell your products in. So you just don't want random reach. You want qualified and relevant reach. So you want a reach of people that might actually buy from you. And what often you'll find with a pod is, yes, you might get a large volume of interactions, and you might get a significant volume of reach, but the reach is of less quality. Because it's people just in a pod using the pod to generate more reach, and they're not people that are actively going to buy from you. So actually my advice is normally actually to spend the time, rather than trying to game it through a pod, is to spend the time actually thinking about your network, thinking about who's within your network that might have connections that might buy your product, and then look to kind of use that engagement rather than use pods to drive engagement.
Brilliant, thanks Dan. I think, are you happy for us to send the attendees your details and the slides? Yeah, okay, so we'll do that, so everyone will have a copy of the slides. And of course, as always, we do post the webinar videos on our YouTube channel, and that is on the Essex Startups channel, so look out for that, and subscribe to the channel if you want to keep up to date with all of our webinars. And of course, next week our investment readiness series is starting again, and we start with what do investors look for on Tuesday. And I'm just checking through the chat here, so anything else? And Dan, any courses or anything you mentioned, people can contact you about those, can't they?
Yeah, feel free to drop me a line. I'm on LinkedIn as well, Dan Spicer, so feel free to connect with me there and drop me a message if you've got any other questions. If I can point you in the right direction as well. We do have our own courses, so happy to talk through that as well. But yeah, feel free to connect with me in the usual social network places.
Brilliant.
And then at Ventura Digital on LinkedIn profile. I see there's 28 people still on the call, so if all 28 of you like our recent post, then I've hit my targets as well. So.
Okay, brilliant. Thanks, Dan. So we'll wrap it up there. So thanks everyone again, and do follow the UEZ Space to Grow on Twitter and Facebook. Stay up to date with our latest events. And so again, next week we get started on our investment readiness with what do investors look for, and that'll be same time again at 2 o'clock. So please do register and have a look at our website as well for to register for those events. And thank you very much, and we'll leave it there. Thanks, Dan.